Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. The morning sun filtered through the pristine windows of the Jackson family home in suburban Denver, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. Walker Jackson stood at the kitchen island, methodically preparing his 7-year-old daughter Emily's lunch. His movements precise and calculated, traits that had made him successful in his security consulting business. "Dad, do I have to go to school today?" Emily asked, her small voice barely above a whisper as she picked at her breakfast cereal. Walker studied his daughter's face, noting the dark circles under her eyes that had been growing more pronounced since they'd moved into this house 6 months ago. Emily had always been bright and talkative, but lately, she'd become withdrawn, spending most of her time alone. "Of course, sweetheart. Education is important," Walker replied, though something in his gut told him there was more to her reluctance than typical childhood complaints. His wife, Letha Jackson, breezed into the kitchen wearing a perfectly pressed business suit, her blonde hair immaculately styled. At 34, she still turned heads wherever she went, something Walker had once taken pride in. Now, he noticed how she avoided his gaze, how her phone seemed permanently attached to her hand. "I'll be late tonight," Letha announced, grabbing her coffee cup without looking at either of them. "Big client meeting." Walker nodded, though he'd noticed these big client meetings had become increasingly frequent. Letha worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized firm downtown, a job that had never required such extensive overtime before. "Which client?" Walker asked casually, but Letha was already heading toward the garage. "The Morrison account," she called back, her voice slightly too high. "Adrian thinks we might land a contract if we present tonight." Adrian. Walker had heard that name mentioned more often lately. Adrian Potts, the creative director at Letha's firm, was supposedly spearheading several major campaigns. Walker made a mental note to research Mr. Potts more thoroughly. After Letha left, Walker helped Emily gather her backpack, noticing how she carefully avoided the family room where her older brother Kyle usually watched morning cartoons. Kyle, their 15-year-old, had been different lately too, defensive, argumentative, and oddly protective of his mother. "Emily, is everything okay at school?" "At home?" Walker asked, kneeling to her level. Emily's eyes darted around nervously before she shook her head. "Everything's fine, Daddy." But Walker Jackson hadn't built a successful security firm by ignoring his instincts. 20 years of military service and another 10 running background checks and threat assessments for high-profile clients had taught him to read people, to spot lies, to identify vulnerabilities. His own family, it seemed, was full of them. As he drove Emily to school, Walker's mind wandered to the changes he'd observed over the past months. The new house had been Letha's idea. A fresh start, she'd called it. Bigger, more expensive, in a better neighborhood. They could afford it, thanks to Walker's thriving business, but the timing had struck him as odd. Why the sudden urge to move from the home they'd built together? Then there were the small things, new clothes, expensive perfume, a sudden interest in yoga classes that required special outfits and equipment. Letha had always been image conscious, but this felt different, more secretive. After dropping Emily off, Walker returned home to find Kyle getting ready for school. The teenager barely acknowledged his father's presence, grabbing his backpack and heading for the door. "Kyle, wait," Walker called out. "We need to talk." "About what?" Kyle's tone was defensive, his shoulders tense. "About your attitude lately. About your mother. About this family." Kyle's face flushed red. "There's nothing to talk about. Everything's fine. Is it?" Walker stepped closer to his son, noting how Kyle's eyes shifted away. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everyone in this house is keeping secrets." "Maybe you should ask Mom about secrets," Kyle muttered, then immediately looked like he regretted saying it. "What does that mean?" "Nothing. I'm late for school." Kyle bolted for the door, leaving Walker standing alone in the foyer of a house that suddenly felt more like a stage than a home. Walker spent the rest of the morning in his home office, ostensibly working on client files, but his mind kept returning to Kyle's parting comment. As a former Army intelligence officer, Walker had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, Every instinct was screaming that something was very wrong with his family. He pulled out his laptop and began what he did best: investigation. Adrian Potts was 38, divorced, no children. He joined Letha's firm 8 months ago, right around the time she'd started suggesting they needed more space, a bigger house, a fresh start. The timeline was suspicious, but Walker needed more than coincidence. He opened a secure program he used for client work, one that could track digital footprints, and began mapping out patterns. Letha's credit card statements showed charges at restaurants Walker didn't recognize, shopping trips she'd never mentioned, and a concerning pattern of purchases at a boutique hotel downtown. His phone buzzed with a text from Letha: "Meeting running long. We'll be very late. Don't wait up." Walker stared at the message, noting the timestamp. It was barely noon. That evening, Walker ordered pizza for himself and Emily. Kyle had texted that he was eating at a friend's house, another recent development. As they sat in the dining room, Walker noticed Emily pushing her food around her plate, her appetite non-existent. "Emily, you've barely eaten anything today. Are you feeling sick?" "No, Daddy." She looked up at him with eyes far too serious for a 7-year-old. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. You can ask me anything. Do you love Mommy?" The question hit Walker like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that?" Emily's lower lip trembled. Because... She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Never mind." Walker moved his chair closer to his daughter. "Emily, if something is bothering you, you can tell me. I'm here to protect you, to protect our family. But I can't help if I don't know what's wrong." Emily stared at her plate for a long moment, then whispered, "Sometimes I hear things at night. Things that make me scared." "What kind of things?" "Voices. In Mommy's room." "But you're supposed to be at work," and Kyle says. Emily clamped her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with fear. Walker's blood ran cold. "Kyle says what, sweetheart?" "That I shouldn't tell you. That it would hurt your feelings." Walker forced his voice to remain calm, though inside he felt something dark and primal stirring. The same cold fury that had made him so effective in the military, that had helped him survive missions that broke other men. "Emily, you never have to keep secrets that make you scared. Especially not from me. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "But I don't want to make you sad, Daddy." Walker pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her close while his mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. His wife was having an affair. His son was covering for her. And his 7-year-old daughter was being forced to keep secrets that were eating her alive. "Emily," he said softly, "I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what you tell me, I will always love you, and I will always protect you. Can you remember that?" Emily nodded against his chest, and Walker made a silent promise to himself. Whatever was happening in his house, whatever betrayal his family was hiding, he would uncover the truth. And then he would make sure that those responsible paid for every moment of fear they put his daughter through. Walker Jackson had spent his career protecting others. Now, it was time to protect himself. Chapter 2. The Revelation. 3 days later, Letha announced she needed to attend a weekend conference in Chicago. Kyle would be staying at his friend Darren's house for the weekend, leaving Walker alone with Emily. As Walker watched his wife pack her overnight bag with unusual care, selecting outfits he'd never seen before, he felt the familiar weight of certainty settling in his chest. "It's a shame you can't come with me," Letha said, though her tone suggested relief rather than disappointment. "But someone needs to stay with Emily." "Of course," Walker replied evenly. "Have a safe trip." He kissed her goodbye at the door, noting how she stiffened slightly at his touch, how her perfume was different, more expensive, more sensual. As her car disappeared down the street, Walker turned to find Emily watching from the stairs, her small face etched with an expression far too knowing for a child her age. Friday evening passed quietly. Walker ordered Chinese takeout, and he and Emily watched movies on the couch. But as bedtime approached, Emily grew increasingly anxious, fidgeting with the hem of her pajamas and casting nervous glances toward her mother's bedroom. "Daddy," she said as Walker tucked her into bed, "will you leave your door open tonight?" "Of course, sweetheart. Is there something specific you're worried about?" Emily bit her lip, clearly wrestling with something. "Sometimes, when Mommy's here, there are bad dreams. but they're not really dreams. Walker sat on the edge of her bed, his heart breaking for his daughter while rage built like a storm in his chest. Emily, do you want to tell me about these dreams? She shook her head quickly. Kyle said if I tell, it would break up our family. He said you'd leave us. Kyle is wrong, Walker said firmly. I would never leave you, Emily. Never. But if something is scaring you, I need to know about it so I can make it stop. Emily studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Finally, she whispered, tomorrow, when Kyle's not here. I'll show you. Walker kissed her forehead, his mind already working through possibilities. I'll be right here, sweetheart. You're safe. Saturday morning dawned gray and cold. Walker made pancakes while Emily sat at the kitchen counter, pushing them around her plate. She'd been unusually quiet since waking up, her eyes following Walker's every movement as if memorizing them. Daddy, she said suddenly, are you going to work today? No, sweetheart. I'm staying home with you. What? Because... Emily slid off her stool and walked to the window overlooking the backyard. Because I need to show you something. But first, I need to tell you something else. Walker turned off the stove and gave Emily his full attention. Okay, I'm listening. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. Kyle knows about Mommy's secret. He helps her sometimes. What kind of help? He tells her when you're coming home early. He listens to your phone calls. And Emily's voice broke. He gets angry at me when I ask questions. The betrayal hit Walker like a physical blow. His own son, the boy he'd raised, taught to throw a football, helped with homework, was actively working against him. The cold fury that had been building for months crystallized into something harder, more focused. Emily, I want you to know that what Kyle is doing is wrong. You're not supposed to keep secrets that make you scared or sad. Do you understand? Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. Are you mad at me? Never. Walker knelt in front of his daughter, gently wiping her tears. I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell me. Now, what did you want to show me? Emily took his hand, her small fingers trembling as she led him toward the master bedroom. Walker's chest tightened as they approached the door. He'd been sleeping in the guest room lately, claiming work stress was making him restless. Mommy does her homework in the bathroom, Emily said, her voice matter-of-fact. She sits on the floor with her computer and talks to someone. She thinks I don't know, but I can hear her through the wall. Walker's blood ran cold. Their master bathroom shared a wall with Emily's room. What kind of things does she say? She talks about you, about how you don't understand her, about how she deserves better. Emily's voice grew smaller, and she says mean things about me and Kyle sometimes. That we're complications. Walker's hands clenched into fists. Using their own bathroom as a private space to conduct an affair was bad enough, but to speak negatively about their children, to make Emily feel unwanted, was unforgivable. Emily, when does Mommy usually do this homework? When you're supposed to be sleeping, or when you're out of town. Sometimes during the day, when Kyle and I are at school. Emily looked up at him with eyes that held too much knowledge. Daddy, is Mommy going to leave us? Walker felt something break inside his chest. His 7-year-old daughter was living in constant fear of abandonment, while his wife conducted an affair mere feet from their children's bedrooms. The disrespect, the cruelty of it, was staggering. Emily, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Whatever happens between your mother and me, I will never let anything bad happen to you. You are the most important thing in my life. Do you believe me? Emily nodded, throwing her arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you could ever know. As Walker held his daughter, he felt the last vestiges of the man he'd been. The trusting husband, the naive father, die a quiet death. In their place rose something harder, colder, more calculating. He thought of his military training, of the missions where mercy had been a luxury he couldn't afford, of the times when survival had required absolute ruthlessness. Letha Jackson had made a critical error. She turned their children into weapons against him, forced Emily to live in fear, and corrupted Kyle into becoming an accomplice. That was where she'd crossed the line from mere infidelity into something unforgivable. Emily, I need you to do something for me, Walker said, pulling back to look at his daughter. I need you to write down everything you remember about Mommy's bathroom homework. Times, dates, things she said. Can you do that? Emily nodded solemnly. Will it help? Yes, sweetheart. It will help me protect you. As Emily went to get paper and crayons, Walker stepped into the master bathroom. He'd noticed Letha had been more possessive of this space lately, always closing the door, cleaning it herself instead of letting their housekeeper handle it. Now he understood why. He examined the room with professional eyes, noting the positioning, the acoustics, the sight lines. If Letha was conducting video calls from here, she'd need good lighting and minimal background noise. He tested the sound levels, confirming that conversation in this bathroom would indeed carry to Emily's room through the shared wall. His phone buzzed with a text from Letha. Conference is amazing. Learning so much. Miss you both. Walker stared at the message, noting the timestamp. According to his research, there was no marketing conference in Chicago this weekend. Letha was lying, and she wasn't even being careful about it anymore. He opened his laptop and began documenting everything Emily had told him, cross-referencing it with credit card statements, phone records, and travel patterns. The picture that emerged was damning. A months-long affair conducted with callous disregard for their children's well-being. But Walker needed more than evidence of infidelity. He needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal, identify all the players, and plan his response accordingly. Because this wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about a woman who traumatized their daughter and corrupted their son in service of her selfish desires. Walker Jackson had built his career on protecting people from threats they couldn't see coming. Now, it was time to become the threat that Letha and Adrian Potts would never see coming. Emily returned with her drawings and carefully written notes, her 7-year-old handwriting spelling out dates and times with heartbreaking precision. As Walker reviewed her documentation, he felt the final pieces of his old life fall away. The war for his family had begun, and Walker Jackson had no intention of losing. Chapter 3: The Investigation. Monday morning arrived with the pretense of normalcy. Letha returned from her conference with a fake tan and a guilty smile, regaling them with stories about marketing strategies and networking events that Walker knew were fabrications. Kyle watched his father carefully across the breakfast table, his teenage face a mask of poorly concealed anxiety. "How was your weekend with Emily?" Letha asked, buttering her toast with studied casualness. "Enlightening," Walker replied, earning a sharp look from Kyle. "We had some very interesting conversations." Emily, following the plan they'd discussed, remained quiet but kept her eyes on her father. Walker had spent Sunday preparing her for what was to come, explaining that they needed to be very careful and very smart about protecting their family. After everyone left for work and school, Walker began his real investigation. 20 years of military intelligence work had taught him that successful operations required thorough reconnaissance, careful planning, and patience. He would not move against Letha and Adrian until he had complete information. Walker's first stop was Adrian Potts' apartment complex. Using skills he'd honed tracking targets in Afghanistan, Walker conducted surveillance on the building, noting entry and exit patterns, security measures, and resident behaviors. Adrian lived in an upscale development downtown, the same area where Letha's credit card showed those mysterious hotel charges. Walker's phone contained tracking software he'd originally developed for client protection services. With a few modifications, it could monitor location data, call logs, and text messages. That evening, while Letha showered, Walker cloned her phone data onto his secure server. The results were devastating and illuminating in equal measure. Letha and Adrian had been communicating since her first day at the new job 8 months ago. The early messages were professional, but within weeks they'd escalated to explicit sexual content. Walker read through months of conversations where his wife had complained about their marriage, their children, and their life together with shocking viciousness. "Walker has no imagination," she'd written. "He thinks providing for us financially is the same as being a real husband. I need someone who understands passion. Emily is so needy lately," another message read. "Sometimes I think we had kids too young. They're holding us back from really living." But the messages about Kyle were the most disturbing. "Kyle knows about us, and he's fine with it. He actually said he thinks his father is boring and that I deserve to be happy. Smart kid, he gets it. Walker felt bile rise in his throat. Letha hadn't just corrupted Kyle. She'd made him an active participant in her deception. His 15-year-old son had been groomed into betraying his own father. The phone records revealed that Letha and Adrian spoke multiple times daily, often while Walker was in the same house. Credit card statements showed expensive dinners, hotel stays, and shopping trips that coincided with Walker's business travel. They'd been using his absence, his hard work providing for the family, as opportunities to conduct their affair. But the most damning evidence came from Letha's cloud storage account. Walker found hundreds of photos and videos, including intimate recordings made in their family bathroom, the same space Emily could hear from her bedroom. The violation was so complete, so intentional, that Walker felt something fundamental shift inside him. That night, as Letha slept beside him, or pretended to sleep, Walker lay awake planning. His military training had taught him that effective warfare required understanding your enemy's weaknesses, their support structures, and their escape routes. Letha and Adrian had made several critical errors that would facilitate their destruction. First, they documented everything electronically, creating a digital trail that would serve as irrefutable evidence. Second, they'd involved Kyle, creating a witness whose loyalty could be turned. Third, they traumatized Emily, giving Walker not just motivation, but moral justification for extreme measures. Over the next week, Walker built comprehensive profiles on both targets. Adrian Potts was ambitious but careless, recently divorced due to his own infidelity, and deeply in debt despite his impressive salary. He'd been embezzling small amounts from client accounts to fund his lifestyle, something Letha either didn't know or chose to ignore. Walker also discovered that Adrian had a history of targeting married women at his previous jobs, a pattern that suggested this wasn't love, but predatory behavior. Armed with this information, Walker began planning phase 2 of his operation. Friday evening, Walker announced he would be traveling to Portland for a client meeting the following week. "How long will you be gone?" Letha asked, though her excitement was poorly concealed. 3 days, Monday through Wednesday. Walker watched Kyle's reaction carefully. His son immediately reached for his phone, no doubt planning to share this intelligence with his mother. The betrayal stung, but it also provided opportunity. That weekend, Walker had a difficult conversation with Emily about what was going to happen to their family. He explained that Mommy had been lying to them, that she had been talking to another man in ways that wives weren't supposed to, and that their family would need to change. "Will you still be my daddy?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Always," Walker promised. "But we might need to live in a different house, just you and me. Would that be okay?" Emily considered this seriously. "Will I still see Kyle?" Walker's jaw tightened. "Kyle has some decisions to make about who he wants to be. But no matter what, I will always take care of you." On Sunday night, Walker made his final preparations. He'd already moved their important assets to accounts Letha couldn't access, documented her affair with overwhelming evidence, and consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict cases involving child custody. But those were just legal maneuvers. Walker's real plan was something else entirely, a form of justice that would ensure Letha and Adrian paid for every moment of fear they'd put Emily through, every lie they'd told, every violation of trust they'd committed. As Walker packed his bag for the fake business trip, Letha could barely contain her anticipation. "I'll miss you," she said, kissing him goodbye with lips that had been on another man. "I'm sure you will," Walker replied, knowing it would be the last lie she ever told him. 20 minutes after leaving the house, Walker doubled back and parked in a surveillance position where he could monitor his own home. Within an hour, Kyle had left for school, and 30 minutes after that, Adrian Potts' BMW pulled into Walker's driveway. Walker watched his wife welcome her lover into their home, into their bed, and felt the last of his mercy die. He'd given Letha every opportunity to come clean, to show remorse, to consider their children's well-being. Instead, she'd chosen to escalate her betrayal. As Walker photographed Adrian entering his house, he thought about Emily's scared voice asking if Mommy was going to leave them. Letha already had left them in every way that mattered. Now, Walker would simply make that abandonment official, and ensure she paid an appropriate price for the damage she'd caused. The game was about to begin, and Walker Jackson played to win. Chapter 4. The Professional. Walker Jackson had always been underestimated, and he'd learned to use that to his advantage. To his neighbors, he was a mild-mannered security consultant who worked from home and coached Emily's soccer team. To his clients, he was a thorough professional who provided discreet background checks and threat assessments for Denver's elite. What they didn't know was that Walker's security consulting firm was a carefully constructed front for much more sophisticated operations. His real clients included federal agencies, multinational corporations, and individuals who needed problems solved quietly and permanently. The skills Walker had developed during 2 decades of military intelligence work, surveillance, psychological warfare, evidence fabrication, and strategic elimination of threats, translated perfectly to the private sector. His official business handled routine security clearances and background checks. His unofficial business handled situations where traditional legal remedies were insufficient. 3 years earlier, Walker had helped a Fortune 500 CEO remove a board member who was selling company secrets to competitors. The operation had been surgical, planted evidence of tax evasion, fabricated connections to organized crime, and a carefully orchestrated scandal that destroyed the man's reputation so thoroughly that he'd left the country in disgrace. 2 years ago, Walker had assisted a federal judge whose daughter was being stalked by a wealthy ex-boyfriend with political connections. The stalker had disappeared one night after receiving a video of his own children playing in their supposed secure private school. He'd moved to Europe and never contacted the judge's daughter again. Walker's most recent case had involved a pharmaceutical executive who'd been selling diluted cancer medications to children's hospitals. The executive had suffered a mysterious breakdown that led to full confession, disgrace, and a lifetime prison sentence. His assets had been distributed to the families of children who died due to his greed. Walker didn't consider himself a vigilante or a criminal. He was a surgeon removing cancerous growths from society, people who used wealth, power, or privilege to harm others without consequence. Each operation was meticulously planned, legally untraceable, and psychologically devastating to the target. Now, he would apply these skills to the most personal case of his career. That Monday evening, while Letha believed him to be in Portland, Walker was actually in a rented office space across town, coordinating with the team he'd assembled for this operation. Byron Pugh was a former Marine sniper who now worked as a private investigator. Kareem Pineda was a computer specialist who could penetrate any digital system. Chance Tanner was a financial analyst who specialized in asset recovery and economic warfare. Target profiles are complete, Byron reported, laying out surveillance photos on the conference table. Adrian Potts follows predictable patterns. Same coffee shop every morning, same gym 3 times a week, same bar every Friday. He's careless with personal security. Kareem pulled up data on his laptop. His financial situation is worse than we initially thought. He's leveraged to the limit on credit cards, has a second mortgage on his apartment, and his ex-wife is demanding increased alimony payments. He's definitely skimming from client accounts to stay afloat. Chance nodded approvingly. Financial pressure makes people stupid. We can use that. Walker studied the assembled intelligence. What about weaknesses? Psychological vulnerabilities? Classic narcissist, Byron replied. Believes he's smarter than everyone around him. Has a history of leaving digital evidence because he thinks he's untouchable. The pattern with your wife isn't unique. He's done this before. Elaborate. Kareem pulled up a series of photos and documents. Adrian Potts has targeted married women at 3 previous jobs. Always the same pattern. Professional relationship escalates to emotional affair, then sexual relationship. Then he convinces them to leave their husbands for him. Once they're divorced and available, he loses interest and moves on. Walker felt cold fury settle in his chest. So Letha isn't special to him. She's just another mark. Exactly. He's a predator who targets financially stable married women. He uses them for sex, money, and professional advancement, then discards them once they've outlived their usefulness. The revelation added another layer to Walker's rage. Letha wasn't just betraying their family for love. She was being manipulated by a sociopath who saw her as a temporary resource to exploit. What's his endgame with Letha? Walker asked. Byron consulted his notes. Based on his previous patterns, he'll string her along until she divorces you and give him access to half your assets. He'll probably convince her to invest in some scheme he's running, drain her financially, then disappear when someone more attractive comes along. Walker thought about Emily's fearful questions, about Kyle's misguided loyalty, about the months of lies and manipulation. Adrian Potts wasn't just destroying Walker's marriage. He was systematically dismantling Walker's family for profit. Timeline, Walker asked. He's accelerating, Chance reported. Letha has been researching divorce attorneys online. She's also been looking at apartments in Adrian's neighborhood and investigating private schools for Emily. She's planning her exit strategy. The irony wasn't lost on Walker. Letha was planning to take Emily away from the father who loved her and place her in the hands of a man who saw children as complications. Over Walker's dead body. Gentlemen, Walker said, his voice taking on the tone he'd used when briefing special operations teams in Afghanistan, we have a complex target set with multiple objectives. Primary goal is the complete destruction of Adrian Potts, financial, professional, and social. Secondary goal is ensuring Letha Jackson faces appropriate consequences for child endangerment and psychological abuse. Tertiary goal is protecting Emily Jackson from further trauma. Rules of engagement? Byron asked. No physical violence unless absolutely necessary for defensive purposes. No illegal activities that can be traced back to us. Everything must appear to be natural consequences of their own actions. Walker paused, his expression hardening. But within those parameters, there are no limits. I want them destroyed so thoroughly that they serve as a warning to anyone who might consider harming my daughter. Kareem grinned. I like this job already. Over the next 2 hours, Walker outlined a multi-phase operation that would systematically dismantle Adrian and Letha's lives while protecting Emily and giving Kyle one final chance to choose the right side. Phase 1 would involve exposing Adrian's embezzlement to his firm and the authorities, destroying his career and creating legal jeopardy that would make him radioactive to Letha. Phase 2 would focus on Letha herself, using her own documented statements and actions to build an irrefutable case for sole custody of Emily while ensuring she lost access to any marital assets. Phase 3 would be psychological warfare, using their own guilt, paranoia, and mutual distrust to turn Adrian and Letha against each other. Phase 4 would be the end game, complete social and financial ruin for both targets, with Walker emerging as the clearly innocent victim of their cruelty. What about your son? Byron asked carefully. Walker's face went cold. Kyle has chosen his side. He'll get one opportunity to switch teams when the truth comes out. If he continues to support his mother after seeing the evidence of what she's done to Emily, then he's made his choice. And if he doesn't take the opportunity, Walker thought about his son, the boy he taught to fish, help with homework, cheered for at basketball games. The same boy who is now actively helping destroy their family. Then Kyle will learn that choices have consequences. I won't abandon him, but he'll have to earn his way back into my trust. And he'll do it while watching what happens to people who betray me. As the meeting concluded, Walker felt the familiar calm that came before a complex operation. Everything was in motion now. By the time Letha realized what was happening, it would be too late to stop it. Walker's phone buzzed with a text from his wife. Missing you. Hope Portland is going well. Emily asks about you constantly. Walker almost laughed at the irony. Emily wasn't asking about him. She was worried about what would happen when Mommy's lies finally caught up with her. But that worry would end soon. Walker Jackson was coming home, and he was bringing justice with him. Chapter 5. Gathering the Storm. When Walker returned from his business trip, he found his house transformed into a stage set for deception. Fresh flowers filled the vases. Letha had cooked his favorite meal, and the atmosphere practically hummed with artificial domesticity. Welcome home. Letha greeted him with an enthusiastic kiss, her performance flawless except for the guilt in her eyes. How was Portland? Productive, Walker replied, noting how Kyle watched the interaction from the doorway with poorly concealed anxiety. Very productive. Emily ran to him with genuine excitement, wrapping her arms around his waist. Daddy, I missed you so much. I missed you too, sweetheart. Walker lifted his daughter, catching Letha's flash of irritation at Emily's obvious preference for her father. Did you have fun while I was gone? Mommy had friends over, Emily said innocently. But Kyle said I had to stay in my room. Walker saw Kyle's face flush red, while Letha forced a bright smile. Just some colleagues from work. You know how boring adult conversations can be. That evening, while Letha showered, Walker reviewed the intelligence his team had gathered during his absence. Kareem had installed sophisticated monitoring equipment throughout the house, capturing everything that had occurred during Walker's absence. The evidence was damning. Adrian had spent 2 full days in Walker's home, in Walker's bed, eating Walker's food. They discussed their future together, including plans to convince Emily that Walker was unstable and unsuitable for custody. Most disturbingly, they talked about Kyle as an asset to be managed rather than a child to be protected. The kid's totally on board, Adrian had said, unaware he was being recorded. Hates his old man, thinks I'm cool. He'll testify that Walker was never around, never paid attention to the family. Perfect character witness. What about Emily? Letha had asked. Kids adapt. She'll forget about Daddy soon enough when she sees how much better life can be. Walker saved that recording to a secure server. When the custody hearing came, a judge would hear Adrian discussing his plans to erase Emily's father from her life. But Walker's most valuable intelligence came from an unexpected source. Byron surveillance had captured a heated argument between Adrian and an unknown woman in the parking lot of Adrian's apartment complex. Facial recognition identified her as Hillary Daniel, Adrian's ex-wife. He owes me $30,000 in back alimony, Hillary had told Byron when he'd approached her as a private investigator hired by concerned parties to investigate Adrian's finances. The bastard claims he's broke, but I know he's hiding money somewhere. He always is. Hillary had been more than happy to provide information about her ex-husband's financial crimes, his history of targeting married women, and his pattern of manipulation and abandonment. She'd also mentioned that Adrian had been bragging about his current score, a wealthy consultant's wife who was planning to leave her husband. He's already spending her money, Hillary had revealed. New clothes, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to Vegas he couldn't afford otherwise. He thinks he's hit the jackpot. Walker realized that Adrian had been using Letha's credit cards to fund their affair, technically theft, since the cards were in Walker's name and unauthorized by him. Another felony to add to the growing list. More importantly, Hillary had agreed to help expose Adrian's crimes in exchange for Byron's assistance in recovering her stolen alimony payments. She had financial records, photographs, and documented evidence of Adrian's embezzlement schemes dating back years. By Thursday, Walker had assembled a comprehensive dossier that would destroy Adrian Potts personally, professionally, and legally. But he needed to coordinate the timing carefully to maximize psychological impact while protecting Emily from collateral damage. That evening, Walker had a carefully scripted conversation with Kyle. Son, we need to talk about your mother. Kyle's defensive walls went up immediately. What about her? I think you know more about what's been happening in this house than you're letting on. Walker kept his voice calm, non-accusatory. I think you've been put in an impossible position, and I want to help you. I don't know what you're talking about. Walker pulled out his tablet and showed Kyle a single photograph. Adrian's car in their driveway, while Walker was supposedly in Portland. Kyle's face went white. Dad, I can explain. Kyle, I need you to listen very carefully. Your mother is having an affair with Adrian Potts. She's been using our family home to conduct this relationship. She's been lying to all of us for months, and she's been planning to take Emily away from me. Kyle started to protest, but Walker held up a hand. I know she's told you that I'm the problem, that I don't understand her, that she deserves better. She's also told you that keeping her secrets is protecting our family. But Kyle, I need you to understand something. The man your mother is involved with is not who she thinks he is. Walker showed Kyle the financial records Hillary had provided, the evidence of Adrian's pattern with other married women, and the recordings of Adrian discussing Kyle and Emily as pawns to be manipulated. He doesn't care about you, your mother, or your sister, Walker said quietly. You're all just resources to him, and when he's finished using your mother, he'll disappear and leave all of us to deal with the wreckage. Kyle stared at the evidence, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally understanding. Mom doesn't know about this. Your mother knows what she wants to know. She's so invested in the fantasy that she's not seeing the reality. Walker leaned forward. Kyle, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to protect our family and make sure Emily never has to be afraid again. But I need to know, are you willing to help me protect your sister? Kyle was quiet for a long moment, processing everything he'd learned. Finally, he looked up with tears in his eyes. Dad, I'm sorry. I thought, Mom said you didn't love us anymore, that you were always working, always distant. She said Adrian made her happy in ways you never could. Kyle, I've been working so hard because I wanted to provide for this family. I wanted to give you and Emily every opportunity, but I should have been paying more attention to what was happening at home. That's on me. What do you need me to do? Walker felt a surge of relief. His son was still salvageable. I need you to act normal around your mother until this is over. Don't let her know that you know the truth about Adrian. Can you do that? Kyle nodded, his jaw set with determination that reminded Walker of himself at that age. What's going to happen to Mom? Your mother made choices, Kyle. Now she has to live with the consequences. But you and Emily, you're my priority. Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're both safe. As Kyle went to his room to process everything he'd learned, Walker felt a piece of his family falling back into place. His son had been manipulated and lied to, but underneath the confusion and misguided loyalty, Kyle was still a good kid who wanted to protect his family. Now Walker had to make sure that when everything came crashing down, Emily and Kyle would be standing safely beside him while Letha and Adrian faced the ruins of their own making. The storm was gathering, and Walker Jackson controlled the weather. Chapter 6. The Trap is Set. Friday evening brought another of Letha's spontaneous work dinners. Walker watched her prepare for the evening with meticulous care. New dress, expensive perfume, jewelry he'd bought her for their anniversary, being worn for another man. Don't wait up, she said, kissing him goodbye with practiced deception. This client is really high maintenance. I'm sure they are, Walker replied, knowing that Adrian was indeed high maintenance, just not in the way Letha intended. After Letha left, Walker gathered Emily and Kyle in the living room. It was time for the final phase of preparation. Kids, I need to tell you something important about what's going to happen this weekend. Emily curled up against his side while Kyle sat forward, alert and ready. Since their conversation 2 days earlier, Kyle had been a different person, more mature, more protective of Emily, and visibly angry at how he'd been manipulated. Sunday, some things are going to change in our family, Walker continued. People are going to learn the truth about what's been happening here, and it's going to be very difficult for everyone. Will Mommy be in trouble? Emily asked in a small voice. Walker chose his words carefully. Mommy made some choices that hurt our family, sweetheart. When grown-ups make bad choices, there are consequences. But I want you to know that none of this is your fault, and you're going to be safe no matter what happens. Emily nodded solemnly while Kyle reached over to squeeze her hand. The bond between the siblings had strengthened considerably since Kyle learned the truth about his mother's affair. What do you need us to do? Kyle asked. Tomorrow is Saturday. Your mother will probably want to spend time with both of you. She's going to be feeling guilty about what she's been doing, so she might be extra attentive. I want you both to be polite and normal, but you don't have to pretend to be happy if you're not. What about Sunday? Kyle pressed. Sunday, we're going to have some visitors. People who need to see our family situation for themselves. Emily, do you remember the nice judge we talked about? The one who helps decide where children should live. Emily nodded. Walker had prepared her carefully for the custody evaluation that would take place, explaining that sometimes judges needed to make sure children were safe and happy. She's going to come here with some other people, and they're going to ask you questions about how you feel living here. I want you to tell them the truth about everything, about being scared at night, about the secrets you were told to keep, about anything that made you worried or sad. Can you do that? Will it help? Emily asked. Yes, sweetheart. It will help make sure you never have to be scared in your own home again. Kyle looked troubled. Dad, what about Mom? I know she lied to us, but she's still our mother. Walker had been dreading this question, but Kyle deserved an honest answer. Kyle, your mother is going to face consequences for her choices. She's going to lose things that were important to her. But here's what I need you to understand. Everything that happens to her is the result of what she chose to do. You didn't cause it, Emily didn't cause it, and I didn't cause it. Your mother caused it when she decided to put her affair ahead of her children's well-being. Will we ever see her again? Emily asked. I don't know, sweetheart. That will depend on whether your mother can learn from her mistakes and become the kind of person who puts her children first. Right now, she's not that person. You don't understand. Adrian was helping us. He was going to make sure Emily and I were financially secure when Letha stopped herself, realizing what she'd almost admitted. When you what, Letha? When you left me and took my daughter to live with a man who embezzles money from cancer charities. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Judge Blake raised her eyebrows at this new information. Letha, are you there? Walker, please. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand about our marriage, about what I need about. Letha, I'm here with Judge Blake from Family Court, representatives from Child Services, and FBI agents investigating Adrian's crimes. If you have something to say about our marriage or our children, this would be an excellent time to say it. Another long silence. Then, Letha's voice, smaller and more desperate. You planned this. You knew about Adrian and you set him up. No, Letha. Adrian set himself up when he decided to steal money from his clients. You set yourself up when you decided to conduct an affair in our family bathroom, while our daughter tried to sleep next door. I simply documented the evidence and made sure the appropriate authorities were informed. What about Emily? What about our family? Walker looked at his daughter, who was coloring at the kitchen table while Kyle helped her. Both children finally relaxed and peaceful in their own home. Emily is fine, Letha. She's safe. She's not scared anymore. And she's surrounded by people who put her welfare ahead of their own selfish desires. As for our family, you destroyed that when you chose Adrian over your children. Walker, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... Letha, there's no we anymore. You're going to be arrested as an accessory to Adrian's financial crimes. You're going to lose custody of Emily because you've demonstrated that you're willing to traumatize her to facilitate your affair. And you're going to discover that the man you threw your family away for never loved you. He was just using you for money and sex until something better came along. Judge Blake gestured for Walker to wrap up the call. Letha, I suggest you hire a good attorney. You're going to need one. Don't come to this house. Don't contact Emily. And don't contact Kyle unless your lawyer advises it. We'll communicate through our attorneys from now on. Walker ended the call to find everyone in the room staring at him. Mr. Jackson, Judge Blake said carefully, that was remarkably well orchestrated. Your Honor, I spent 20 years in military intelligence. When someone threatens my family, I respond with all available resources. And Adrian Potts? How did you discover his criminal activities? I ran a standard background check as part of documenting my wife's affair. His embezzlement came to light during that investigation. I felt obligated to report it to the appropriate authorities. Byron Pugh, Walker's former Marine colleague, stepped out of the kitchen where he'd been photographing evidence. Your Honor, Mr. Potts has been stealing from children's cancer research funds for over 2 years. Mrs. Jackson's affair provided him with additional resources, but his criminal activity predates their relationship. Judge Blake shook her head in disgust. Mr. Jackson, based on what I've seen today, I'm prepared to grant you emergency temporary custody of Emily, with supervised visitation only for your wife, pending further evaluation. Emily looked up from her coloring. Does that mean I don't have to be scared anymore? No, sweetheart, Judge Blake replied. You don't have to be scared anymore. As the officials prepared to leave, Walker felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. His family was safe, but the cost had been tremendous. Letha would face criminal charges, social disgrace, and the loss of her children. Adrian would spend years in federal prison. But Emily was smiling for the first time in months, and Kyle was standing taller, no longer burdened by secrets and lies. Sometimes, Walker reflected, justice required the complete destruction of those who chose evil over good. And Walker Jackson had never been more committed to justice than when it came to protecting his children. The war was far from over, but the first major battle had been decisively won. Chapter 8. The Dominoes Fall. Monday morning brought the sound of news vans setting up outside Walker's house. The arrest of Adrian Potts for embezzling from children's cancer funds had made headlines, and his connection to a prominent marketing firm had turned a financial crime story into a human interest scandal. Walker watched from his office window as reporters interviewed neighbors about the perfect family next door that had harbored such darkness. He'd anticipated the media attention and prepared for it carefully. At 9 a.m., Walker's attorney, Harry Sellers, arrived for their scheduled meeting. The custody hearing is scheduled for Thursday, Harry reported. Letha's attorney is arguing that her affair doesn't constitute child endangerment and that you've orchestrated a malicious prosecution to gain custody advantage. What's her attorney's strategy? They're claiming that you manipulated the evidence, that Adrian was coerced into confessing, and that your military background makes you an unstable influence on the children. Harry smiled grimly. It's a desperate defense, but they have to try something. Walker pulled out a thick folder. Then perhaps they should see this. The folder contained additional evidence Walker had held in reserve. Recordings of Letha and Adrian explicitly discussing how to alienate Emily from her father. Financial records showing they'd already begun spending Walker's money on apartment deposits and private school applications. And most damning of all, a video recording of Adrian bragging to his friends about hitting the jackpot with a rich consultant's wife. Walker, this is devastating, Harry said, reviewing the materials. With this evidence, Letha won't just lose custody. She could face charges for conspiracy to commit parental alienation. That's the idea. At 2 p.m., Walker received a call from his former colleague Byron Pugh. Adrian's not handling prison well, Byron reported. He's claiming that everything was Letha's idea, that she seduced him into the affair and convinced him to steal money to fund their future together. Walker wasn't surprised. Men like Adrian always blamed women when their schemes collapsed. Is anyone believing him? The prosecutors aren't buying it. They have evidence of his previous embezzlement schemes dating back years. But Letha's attorney might try to use his statements to minimize her culpability. Let them try. I have recordings of Letha actively participating in planning Emily's alienation from me. Adrian's lies won't help her. That evening, Walker sat down with Emily and Kyle for dinner at their kitchen table, the first peaceful family meal they'd shared in months. Dad, kids at school are asking questions about the news stories, Kyle said. How should I handle it? Tell them the truth. Your mother made some bad choices. She got involved with a bad man, and now she's facing the consequences. You and Emily are safe now, and that's what matters. Emily looked up from her macaroni and cheese. Daddy, will Mommy go to jail? The conversation was painful, but necessary. Walker needed his children to understand that the dissolution of their family wasn't random or cruel. It was the logical consequence of Letha's choices. Saturday unfolded exactly as Walker had predicted. Letha returned home with expensive gifts for the children and an abundance of forced cheerfulness. She insisted on taking them shopping, cooking their favorite meals, and spending quality time together that felt more like a performance than genuine family bonding. Emily played along politely, but stayed close to Walker whenever possible. Kyle was civil but distant, his new understanding of his mother's manipulation making her attention feel hollow and manipulative. Walker spent the day making final preparations. His legal team was standing by with completed divorce papers, custody motions, and evidence packages. His financial advisor had secured all marital assets and accounts that only Walker could access. His security team had documented months of Letha's deception and Adrian's criminal activity. Most importantly, Walker had coordinated with Family Court Services to conduct an emergency custody evaluation based on evidence of emotional abuse and child endangerment. The evaluation would take place Sunday afternoon, giving the court professionals an opportunity to see the family dynamics firsthand before Letha had time to craft a defense. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold. matching Walker's mood as he watched Letha prepare for another work commitment. "I have to meet with Adrian about the Morrison project," she announced, not even bothering to maintain the pretense that Adrian was just a colleague anymore. "I'm sure you do," Walker replied. "Take your time. Take all the time you need." Letha looked at him sharply, something in his tone setting off alarm bells. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that I hope you and Adrian have a very productive meeting. I hope you discuss all the plans you've been making together." For the first time in months, Letha looked genuinely afraid. "Walker, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I know everything, Letha. About Adrian, about the affair, about the lies, about your plans to take Emily away from me. I know all of it." Letha's face went white, then red, then calculating. "You're being paranoid. Adrian and I are just—" "Letha, stop." Walker's voice was quiet but filled with such cold authority that Letha actually stepped backward. "We both know what you've been doing. The question now is what you're going to do about it. What do you want?" Letha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to go meet with Adrian. I want you to discuss your future plans together. And I want you to think very carefully about what kind of mother abandons her daughter's emotional needs to pursue an affair with a man who sees children as complications." Letha grabbed her purse and keys with shaking hands. "This isn't over, Walker." "No," Walker agreed. "It's not, but it will be very soon." As Letha's car disappeared down the street, Walker turned to find Emily and Kyle watching from the stairs. "Is today the day, Dad?" Kyle asked. "Yes, son. Today is the day everything changes." Walker gathered his children close, knowing that in a few hours, their family would never be the same. But also knowing that for the first time in months, Emily would go to sleep without fear, and Kyle would understand the difference between loyalty and enabling. The trap was set, the evidence was overwhelming, and Walker Jackson was ready to remind everyone why he'd never lost a war. Chapter 7. The Reckoning Begins. At precisely 2 p.m., 3 black sedans pulled into Walker's driveway. The first car carried Judge Evelyn Blake, who would be conducting the emergency custody evaluation. The second carried representatives from Colorado Child Protective Services. The third carried 2 FBI agents investigating financial crimes in the marketing industry. Walker had choreographed this moment carefully. While Letha was at Adrian's apartment, believing she was safe in her secret world, the real world was about to crash down around both of them. "Mr. Jackson," Judge Blake extended her hand as she approached the front door. "Thank you for accommodating this emergency evaluation. I understand there are serious concerns about child endangerment. Your Honor, I appreciate you taking this matter seriously. My daughter has been living in fear in her own home for months." As the officials entered, Walker noticed Kyle take Emily's hand, positioning himself protectively beside his sister. The siblings had grown closer since learning the truth, united in their need to protect each other from the chaos their mother had created. Judge Blake, a stern woman in her 50s with kind eyes, knelt to Emily's level. "Hello, Emily. I'm Judge Blake. I'm here to make sure you're safe and happy. Is it okay if we talk?" Emily nodded, looking to Walker for reassurance. "Daddy says you help children who are scared." "That's right, sweetheart. Can you tell me about times when you've been scared here at home?" What followed was heartbreaking and damning. Emily, with the clarity that only children possess, described months of whispered conversations that kept her awake, strange men's voices in her mother's room, and a fear that her family was going to break apart. She told the judge about being forced to keep secrets that made her stomach hurt, about her brother's anger and confusion, and about feeling safest when her father was home. Kyle's testimony was even more devastating. As a teenager, he could articulate the psychological manipulation he'd endured, the way his mother had positioned him as a weapon against his father, and the guilt he'd felt for betraying the one parent who'd actually put the children's welfare first. "She told me Dad didn't love us anymore," Kyle said, his voice breaking. "She said he was just staying for the money and that we'd be better off without him. She made me believe that keeping her secrets was protecting Emily. But Emily was getting more scared every day, and I didn't know what to do." Judge Blake's expression grew more serious with each revelation. "Kyle, did your mother ever ask you to lie about your father's behavior or character?" "Yes, ma'am. She wanted me to tell people that Dad was never home, that he ignored us, that he had anger problems. None of it was true, but she said it would help her get custody of Emily. The child services representatives took detailed notes while photographing Emily's bedroom, specifically documenting how the sound carried from the master bathroom where Letha had conducted her affairs. The evidence of deliberate emotional abuse was overwhelming. At 3:30 p.m., Walker's phone rang. Letha's name appeared on the screen. "Answer it," Judge Blake instructed, "but put on speaker." "Hello, Letha." "Walker, what the hell is going on?" "There are FBI agents at Adrian's apartment. They're arresting him for embezzlement and fraud." Walker met Judge Blake's eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that, Letha. Where are you?" "I'm at the police station. They want to question me about financial irregularities at my company." "Walker, you have to help me. This is all some kind of mistake." "Is it?" Walker's voice was calm, controlled. "Because I have evidence that Adrian has been using credit cards in my name without authorization." "That's theft, Letha." Walker had been dreading this question, but knew he had to answer honestly. "I don't know, sweetheart. That will depend on what the judge decides. But I want you to understand that whatever happens to Mommy is because of choices she made, not because of anything you did wrong." "I know," Emily said solemnly. "Judge Blake explained that to me. She said sometimes grown-ups make bad choices and have to go to timeout, but it's not the children's fault." Kyle reached over and ruffled his sister's hair. "That's right, Em. And Dad and I are going to make sure you never have to worry about grown-up problems again." Walker felt a surge of pride watching Kyle step into his role as protective big brother. The crisis had forced Kyle to mature quickly, but it had also revealed the young man of character Walker had always hoped his son would become. Wednesday brought more devastating news for Letha's defense. Adrian's ex-wife, Hillary Daniel, had provided prosecutors with evidence that Adrian had been planning to defraud Letha from the beginning. He'd approached Hillary weeks before his arrest, bragging about his long con on a wealthy married woman who was going to fund his escape from debt. "He told me he was just waiting for her to divorce her husband and get half his assets," Hillary had testified. "Then he was going to convince her to invest in some fake business venture, disappear with the money." He called her the perfect mark, financially naive and emotionally desperate. The revelation that Adrian had never loved Letha, that she destroyed her family for a man who saw her as nothing more than a source of income, added psychological devastation to her legal troubles. Thursday morning arrived with Walker, Kyle, and Emily preparing for the custody hearing that would determine their family's future. "Remember," Walker told his children, "just tell the truth about how you feel and what you've experienced. The judge needs to understand what we've all been through." Judge Blake's courtroom was packed with reporters, social workers, and legal observers. The case had become a referendum on parental responsibility and the protection of children from selfish adult behavior. Letha's attorney argued that Walker had orchestrated an elaborate frame-up, that his military background made him controlling and manipulative, and that children belonged with their mothers regardless of temporary lapses in judgment. Walker's attorney systematically destroyed each argument with evidence. He showed that Walker had only documented crimes that were already occurring, that his military service involved protecting innocents rather than harming them, and that Letha's temporary lapse had involved months of psychological abuse directed at a 7-year-old child. When Emily testified via closed-circuit television from the judge's chambers, her simple honesty was devastating. "I was scared all the time," she told Judge Blake. "I didn't understand why Mommy was always whispering to strange men, why she got angry when I asked questions, and why Kyle was so sad. I just wanted my family to be normal again." Kyle's testimony was equally powerful. As a teenager, he could articulate the manipulation he'd endured and the relief he felt when the truth finally came out. "My mother turned me into a weapon against my father," Kyle said. "She made me believe that protecting her secrets was protecting our family. But she was actually destroying our family. And I was helping her do it without understanding what was happening." The coup de grace came when Walker played the recording of Adrian discussing Emily and Kyle as complications to be managed rather than children to be protected. Judge Blake's verdict was swift and comprehensive. Walker was granted sole custody of Emily, with Letha's visitation rights suspended pending completion of parental fitness evaluations and psychological counseling. Kyle, as a minor but old enough to express preference, chose to remain with his father. But Judge Blake wasn't finished. "Mrs. Jackson," she said, addressing Letha directly, "you have committed one of the most egregious violations of parental responsibility I've seen in 20 years on this bench. You deliberately exposed your minor daughter to psychological trauma to facilitate an extramarital affair. You corrupted your teenage son into becoming an accomplice in deception and betrayal. And you plan to remove both children from their father based on fabricated allegations of unfitness." Letha sat stone-faced as Judge Blake continued. "Your actions constitute child emotional abuse, conspiracy to commit parental alienation, and accessory to financial fraud. I am referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Until such time as you can demonstrate genuine remorse and undergo extensive psychological rehabilitation, you are prohibited from unsupervised contact with either child." As the courtroom cleared, Walker felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but the cost to everyone involved had been enormous. Emily and Kyle would grow up without their mother unless Letha chose to do the hard work of becoming the parent they deserved. Adrian would spend years in federal prison, his life destroyed by his own greed and predatory behavior. But Walker's children were safe, the truth had been revealed, and the family he'd fought to protect was finally free from fear. The war was over, and Walker Jackson had won. Chapter 9. New Beginnings. 6 months after the custody hearing, Walker stood in his kitchen making pancakes, while Emily helped measure ingredients and Kyle set the table. The morning routine had become a sacred ritual in their household, a daily affirmation that they were a real family, not the performance they'd been living for so long. "Dad, can we invite Uncle Byron for dinner this weekend?" Emily asked, stirring the batter with intense concentration. "I want to show him my science project." "Of course, sweetheart. Uncle Byron loves your science projects." Byron Pugh had become a regular presence in their lives, a surrogate uncle who helped fill the void left by extended family members who'd chosen Letha's side in the divorce. Walker hadn't minded losing fair-weather relatives who couldn't understand why he'd fought so hard to protect his children. Kyle looked up from arranging silverware. "Dad, I got accepted to the engineering program at Colorado State. Full scholarship." Walker felt a surge of pride. Kyle had channeled his guilt and anger over the family crisis into academic achievement, earning straight A's and impressive SAT scores that attracted attention from several universities. "That's fantastic, son. I'm proud of you. It's because of everything you taught me about integrity and taking responsibility for my actions. I won't make the same mistakes Mom made." Walker placed a gentle hand on Kyle's shoulder. "Kyle, you're not responsible for your mother's choices. You were manipulated by an adult who should have protected you instead of using you. The fact that you learned from the experience and grew stronger shows what kind of man you're becoming." Emily looked up from her pancake duties. "Kyle's the best big brother ever. He helps me with homework and teaches me to throw footballs and never lies to me about anything." The bond between the siblings had become unbreakable. Kyle had appointed himself Emily's protector and had taken that role seriously, becoming the stable male figure she needed while Walker worked to rebuild their family's financial and emotional security. Walker's business had actually grown during the crisis. The media attention surrounding his methodical takedown of Adrian Potts had attracted clients who needed someone capable of handling complex, high-stakes situations with surgical precision. Walker now employed a team of investigators, analysts, and security specialists who help protect families and businesses from predators like Adrian. At 10 a.m., Walker's attorney called with an update on Letha's situation. She pled guilty to accessory charges in Adrian's embezzlement case, Harry reported. 2 years probation, community service, and full restitution to the victims. The judge was lenient because she cooperated with prosecution and showed genuine remorse. And the custody situation? She's completed 6 months of court-ordered therapy and wants to petition for supervised visitation with Emily. Her therapist says she's made significant progress in understanding how her actions harm the children. Walker considered this carefully. Emily had occasionally asked about her mother, usually wondering if Letha was safe and whether she still loved her children. Walker had answered honestly. Letha was safe. She did love Emily and Kyle, but she'd made terrible choices that hurt everyone. What do you recommend? I think supervised visits might be appropriate if Emily wants them. Your daughter needs to understand that her mother's absence isn't her fault, and she needs the opportunity to develop her own relationship with Letha based on who Letha becomes, not who she was. I'll talk to Emily and Kyle about it. Their feelings are what matter most. That evening, Walker had a careful conversation with his children about their mother's situation. Kids, your mother has been working with doctors to understand why she made the choices she did. She's asked if she can visit with Emily sometimes, with a social worker present to make sure everyone feels safe. Emily considered this seriously. Will she try to take me away from you again? No, sweetheart. The judge made it very clear that you live with me, and that won't change. These visits would just be a chance for you to talk to your mother if you want to. What about Kyle? Emily asked. Can he come too? Kyle looked uncomfortable. I don't think I'm ready to see Mom yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Walker respected his son's decision. Kyle's betrayal had run deeper because he was old enough to understand what he was being asked to do. His healing process would take longer and might never be complete. Emily, you don't have to decide right now. But if you do want to see your mother, Kyle and I will support you completely. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Can I think about it? Of course, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. 2 weeks later, Emily decided she wanted to meet with her mother. The supervised visit took place at a family service center, with a trained counselor present to ensure Emily's emotional safety. Walker waited in the lobby while Emily spent an hour with Letha. When Emily emerged, she was thoughtful but not upset. How was it, sweetheart? Mommy cried a lot. She said she was sorry for scaring me and that she never wanted to hurt our family. She looks different, sadder, but maybe more honest. How do you feel about seeing her? Emily considered this carefully. I still love Mommy, but I don't want to live with her. She made me feel scared for too long. But maybe if she keeps getting better, we can be friends sometimes. Walker was amazed by his daughter's emotional maturity. At 7 years old, Emily had developed a sophisticated understanding of love, forgiveness, and personal boundaries that many adults never achieved. As they drove home, Emily asked, Daddy, will you ever get married again? Walker had been dreading this question. I don't know, sweetheart. Right now, I'm focused on taking care of you and Kyle. Someday, maybe I'll meet someone who loves our family and wants to be part of it. But only if she makes us all happier and safer. She'd have to be really special to be better than just us, Emily said with 7-year-old certainty. Yes, she would. Very special indeed. That night, after Emily was asleep and Kyle was finishing homework, Walker sat in his office reviewing the journey that had brought them to this point. The family photos on his desk told the story. Happy pictures from before the crisis, formal custody hearing photos where everyone looked strained and sad, and new pictures where the remaining family members looked peaceful and genuine. Walker had no regrets about the brutal efficiency with which he'd dismantled Letha and Adrian's plans. They'd threatened his children's well-being, and he'd responded with overwhelming force. The fact that both targets were now facing the consequences of their own choices rather than arbitrary punishment made the outcome morally justifiable. Adrian Potts was serving 8 years in federal prison, his reputation destroyed, his future prospects eliminated. He would never again have the opportunity to prey on vulnerable families. Letha was slowly rebuilding her life, working as a receptionist while paying restitution to Adrian's victims and attending therapy. She might someday become the mother Emily and Kyle deserved, but that would require years of consistent effort and genuine change. Kyle was thriving academically and personally, having learned valuable lessons about integrity, loyalty, and the importance of protecting innocent people from predatory behavior. Emily was happy, safe, and no longer afraid in her own home. She learned that adults who truly love children put those children's needs first, and she'd never again tolerate being made to feel scared or unsafe. As for Walker himself, he learned that some wars are worth fighting regardless of the cost. When someone threatens your family, you respond with everything you have until the threat is eliminated. Walker Jackson had built his life around protecting others. Now, having successfully protected his own children from the greatest threat they'd ever faced, he could rest easy knowing that his family was safe, his enemies were defeated, and justice had been served. The daughter who'd whispered secrets in fear was now laughing freely. The son who'd been manipulated into betrayal had become a protector of innocence. The father who'd been deceived and disrespected had emerged victorious. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. This story ended with justice and peace. Walker Jackson asked for nothing more. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Deception. Maxwell Max, Riker never trusted easily. 15 years in naval intelligence had taught him to see the angles, anticipate betrayal, and always have contingencies. But 4 years ago, when he met Audrey Prescott at a charity gala in Boston, something changed. Her hazel eyes carried a warmth that melted the ice around his heart. And for the first time, Max lowered his guard. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, they were married in a small ceremony on the New England coast. A year later, their son Lucas was born. He has your eyes, Audrey had whispered in the hospital room. Calculating, even as a newborn. Max had laughed it off then. He shouldn't have. When Max decided to leave naval intelligence for private security consulting, Audrey supported him enthusiastically. His new venture, Sentinel Security Solutions, grew rapidly. High-profile clients, government contracts, and a reputation for discretion made the company wildly successful. By Lucas's 4th birthday, Max had amassed a fortune exceeding $30 million. The wealth attracted Audrey's mother, Vivian Prescott, like a moth to flame. A retired psychiatrist with expensive tastes, Vivian had initially disapproved of Max, considering him beneath her daughter. But when the money started flowing, she became an ever-present fixture in their waterfront mansion. Families should stick together, she'd say, refilling her crystal glass with imported scotch. Blood is thicker than water. Max never fully trusted Vivian, but he tolerated her for Audrey's sake. He didn't realize that mother and daughter shared more than genes. They shared a capacity for deception that would make his intelligence trainers proud. In his home office overlooking Boston Harbor, Max reviewed quarterly reports when his private phone buzzed. The message was from Benjamin Reynolds, his former handler, and one of the few people Max still trusted. Package delivered. Contents concerning. Meet tonight. Max deleted the message and checked his security monitors. Lucas was playing in the garden with his nanny, Sophie. Audrey was in the master bedroom on a call. Vivian was in the guest house. All normal, yet something felt off. That evening, Max told Audrey he had a business emergency. Take all the time you need, she said, kissing him softly. Lucas and I will be fine. Actually, Max replied, I thought Lucas might enjoy coming with me. We'll stop for ice cream on the way back. A flash of something, irritation, fear, crossed Audrey's face before her practiced smile returned. Of course, darling. Mother and I will have a girls' night. In a nondescript diner outside the city, Benjamin slid a manila envelope across the table while Lucas enjoyed his chocolate sundae. Surveillance photos, Benjamin explained quietly. Started as routine background on a potential client, then things got interesting. Max flipped through the images. Audrey entering an upscale hotel. Audrey in deep conversation with a man Max didn't recognize. Audrey and the man kissing in an elevator. Who is he? Max asked, his voice dangerously calm. Preston Wallace. Old money from Philadelphia. On paper, he runs a charitable foundation. In reality, it's a sophisticated money laundering operation. We've had eyes on him for years. Max studied the final photo. Audrey, Preston, and Vivian, all three laughing together on the deck of a yacht. There's more. Benjamin continued. Financial analysis shows unusual patterns in your accounts. Small amounts redirected through shell companies. Nearly untraceable. How much? About 3 million so far. And Max, Benjamin hesitated. There's chatter about something bigger in the works. Very concerning chatter. On the drive home, Max watched Lucas in the rearview mirror. The boy was falling asleep, clutching his favorite stuffed whale. Max had never killed anyone outside of sanctioned operations, but looking at his son, he knew he would do anything to protect him. Instead of heading home, Max drove to his office building. In the basement, behind a biometric lock, was a room only he could access. Inside were identities, passports, cash, weapons, remnants of his former life, insurance for scenarios he hoped would never materialize. Now it seemed they would. Chapter 2. Hidden Currents. For the next 2 weeks, Max became the perfect husband. He brought Audrey flowers, arranged date nights, and surprised her with expensive jewelry. He told her business was booming and suggested they celebrate with a weekend cruise on their yacht, the Siren's Call. The 3 of us should go, Audrey suggested over dinner. You, me, and Lucas. And your mother, Max added, watching her reaction carefully. She loves being on the water. Audrey's hesitation was almost imperceptible. Of course, Mother would love that. In his hidden study, Max reviewed the evidence Benjamin had gathered. Preston Wallace had connections to Russian oligarchs and South American cartels. The money laundering operation was sophisticated, but the real concern was a series of encrypted messages suggesting a planned removal and asset acquisition. Max was the removal. The assets were his company and fortune. He installed microscopic cameras throughout the house and yacht, tapped phones, and placed tracking devices in family vehicles. What he discovered confirmed his worst fears. Audrey and Vivian had been plotting with Preston for over a year. He's too cautious, Audrey told Preston during a hotel meeting. Everything is locked down tight. The only way to access the bulk of his fortune is through his death. And the prenup? Preston asked. Ironclad, Vivian interjected. But with him gone and Audrey as Lucas's guardian, she'd control everything until the boy turns 25. More than enough time. The plan needs to be perfect, Preston insisted. No evidence, no suspicion. A tragic accident at sea. Max felt a cold rage building as he watched them discuss his murder so casually. He began preparing countermeasures, creating blind spots in his surveillance where they would think themselves unobserved. 3 days before the planned cruise, Max took Lucas to Dr. Gregory West, a trusted friend and medical professional. I need to know if he's mine, Max said bluntly after Lucas had gone to play in the adjacent room. Gregory's expression was grim. May I ask why you suspect otherwise? Just run the test, Max replied. Urgent and confidential. The next day, Gregory called with the results. DNA confirms it. Max Lucas is definitely your biological son. Relief flooded through Max, followed by renewed determination. They wouldn't just be attempting to kill him. They would be trying to steal his son. On the eve of the cruise, Max asked Sophie, Lucas's nanny, to come to his office. I've always valued your discretion and loyalty, he told the young woman. Now I need both more than ever. Sophie had been with them since Lucas was born. Max had personally selected her, a former military nurse with training in combat situations, qualifications Audrey had never questioned. Whatever you need, Mr. Riker, Sophie replied. Max handed her an envelope. If anything happens to me, follow these instructions exactly. Lucas's life may depend on it. That night, as Audrey slept beside him, Max stared at the ceiling. The woman he had loved, or thought he had loved, was planning his murder. The mother of his child wanted him erased from existence. The depth of the betrayal was almost incomprehensible. But Max had survived in a world where trust was a liability. He hadn't just been trained to detect betrayal. He'd been trained to turn it against his enemies. They thought he was the prey. They were wrong. Chapter 3. The Plunge. The morning of the cruise dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for sailing or for murder. Max loaded the final supplies onto the Siren's Call, while Audrey supervised Lucas's packing. Vivian arrived with enough luggage for a month-long voyage, though they were only planned to be out for the weekend. I like to be prepared, she explained with a tight smile. As they pulled away from the marina, Max noticed a sleek black sedan in the parking lot. Preston Wallace watching from a distance. Max pretended not to see, acting the part of the oblivious husband. Out on the open water, Max played the role perfectly. Attentive father, loving husband, tolerant son-in-law. He mixed drinks, prepared lunch, and took Lucas to the bow to watch for dolphins. They're magical creatures, Max told his son. They know things about the sea that humans can never understand. Like what, Daddy? Lucas asked, eyes wide with wonder. Like how to survive when everything seems hopeless. By late afternoon, they were 20 miles offshore. Max had deliberately disabled the boat's tracking systems and emergency beacon, a fact he knew Audrey had noted with satisfaction. Let's have champagne, Audrey suggested as the sun began to set, to celebrate our beautiful family. Max poured drinks for the adults and juice for Lucas. He pretended to sip his champagne while watching Audrey and Vivian exchange glances. Why don't you show Lucas that trick with the dolphins? Audrey suggested. The one where you splash the water to call them? Max nodded, taking Lucas's hand. Let's go to the rear deck. Better visibility there. As they stood at the stern, splashing water and laughing, Max felt rather than saw Audrey and Vivian approaching from behind. He continued playing with Lucas, seemingly oblivious to the danger. The push, when it came, was forceful, meant to send both him and Lucas over the railing into the churning wake of the yacht. Max had been ready. As he felt hands on his back, he twisted, pulling Lucas close to his chest and grabbing the railing with his free hand. The momentum carried them over, but instead of plunging helplessly into the sea, Max controlled their fall, using his body to shield Lucas from impact. Just before they hit the water, he heard Vivian's cold voice. You'll be erased like you never existed. And Audrey's chilling whisper, goodbye, useless ones. The Atlantic in September was cold enough to kill within hours. Max had prepared for this, wearing a thin wetsuit under his clothes and securing a waterproof pouch to his ankle. As they surfaced, he quickly deployed a compact, inflatable float collar around Lucas's neck. Hold tight, buddy, he whispered to his terrified son. Daddy's got you. Remember our secret game? The one where we pretend to be invisible? We're going to play that now. From above, Audrey and Vivian would see only empty water. The yacht continued forward, gradually shrinking into the distance. Aren't they coming back? Lucas asked, shivering despite the float keeping him above water. No, buddy, but we don't need them to. Max removed the waterproof pouch, extracting a compact GPS transmitter. He activated it with a 3-digit code. Help is already on the way. 40 minutes later, as hypothermia began to threaten, a sleek speedboat approached. Benjamin Reynolds cut the engine, helping Max and Lucas aboard. Right on schedule, Benjamin noted grimly. They didn't even circle back to check. They thought they didn't need to, Max replied, wrapping Lucas in thermal blankets. The yacht will dock at the marina around 10 p.m., Benjamin said. From there, they'll report you missing tomorrow morning. Enough time lag to ensure no real search could find you alive. Max nodded, hugging his confused son close. Lucas, this is my good friend Ben. We need to stay with him for a while, okay? It's part of our invisible game. As the speedboat headed not toward Boston, but to a private dock in a secluded cove, Max looked out at the darkening horizon. The game had only just begun. Chapter 4. Ghosts in the Shadows. The safe house was a rustic cabin nestled in the woods of coastal Maine, far from curious eyes and digital footprints. Max had purchased it years ago under a shell corporation, one of several properties unknown to Audrey or anyone else. How long do we stay here, Daddy? Lucas asked on their third morning, as Max prepared a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. Not too long, buddy. Just until I finish my special work project. Sophie arrived that afternoon, bringing supplies and a familiar present for Lucas. The boy ran to her, excited to see a friendly face. Everything in place? Max asked her quietly while Lucas explored the toy box Sophie had brought. Yes, sir. The surveillance is active. They reported you both missing yesterday morning, as expected. Mrs. Riker gave a very convincing performance for the Coast Guard, hysterical with grief. And the other matter? Handled. Drive West has prepared everything according to your specifications. Max nodded, his expression grave. You understand what happens next? I do, Sophie replied. And I'm prepared. Lucas will be safe with me. That evening, after Lucas was asleep, Max and Benjamin reviewed the surveillance footage from the Riker mansion. Audrey sat in the living room, accepting condolences from friends with tears streaming down her face. Vivian hovered nearby, the perfect image of a grieving grandmother. Oscar-worthy performances, Benjamin muttered. Later, Preston Wallace arrived, ostensibly as a family friend offering support. The cameras captured their conversation in the kitchen, voices low. The Coast Guard is expanding the search area tomorrow, Audrey said. But they've already told me privately that survival was impossible. The water temperature, the distance from shore. How long until it's official? Preston asked. A week, maybe 2 before they're declared presumed dead. Then the probate process begins. And the company? Preston pressed. Majority ownership transfers to me as Lucas's guardian. The board can't block it. It's in the corporate bylaws. Max watched with cold attachment. The woman who had shared his bed for 5 years, who had given birth to his son, was now calculating the hours until his death could be legally established. What's your plan? Benjamin asked as the video feed continued. They think they're hunters, Max replied, his voice devoid of emotion. I'm going to show them what it means to be hunted. Over the next week, Max methodically prepared his counterattack. Using Benjamin's connections and his own considerable resources, he built a comprehensive profile of Preston Wallace's criminal enterprise. Shell companies, money laundering routes, corrupt officials, all meticulously documented. This is enough to put him away for decades, Benjamin observed, reviewing the evidence. Prison is too good for him, Max replied. I want him destroyed, not just incarcerated. Max turned his attention to Audrey's past, uncovering secrets she had carefully concealed. Before meeting Max, she had been involved in a series of calculated relationships with wealthy men, each ending when their usefulness expired. There were restraining orders that had been sealed, allegations of theft that had been settled privately. Vivian's history revealed a pattern of enabling and coordinating her daughter's predatory behavior. The respected psychiatrist had used her professional insights to help Audrey identify and manipulate vulnerable targets. 10 days after their deaths, Max received the call he'd been waiting for. The Coast Guard had officially suspended the search and rescue operation. The news channels reported the tragic story. Successful businessman and his young son presumed dead in a boating accident. That evening, Max sat with Lucas on the cabin porch, watching the sunset. Daddy, are we still playing the invisible game? The boy asked. Max pulled his son close. Yes, but not for much longer. Soon we'll play a new game. It's called Justice. The next morning, Max left Lucas in Sophie's capable hands and departed with Benjamin. Their destination, a private medical facility owned by Dr. Gregory West. Everything is prepared, Drive West assured them. But I must ask again, are you certain about this? The psychological impact alone. I'm certain, Max interrupted. They've already killed me in the eyes of the world. Now I'll use that death to bring them down. The procedure took 6 hours. When it was complete, Max Riker no longer existed. In his place was Robert Caldwell, a man with different facial features, different fingerprints, and a completely legitimate identity. The changes are subtle enough to pass casual inspection, Drive West explained, but significant enough to defeat facial recognition and fool those who knew you, especially since no one is looking for you alive. How long until I'm fully healed? Max, now Robert asked. 2 weeks before the swelling completely subsides. A month before you should risk close contact with anyone who knew you before. Max nodded. Perfect timing. Chapter 5. Shadows into Light. The funeral was a somber affair, attended by Boston's elite. Audrey Riker, elegant in black, accepted condolences with dignified grief. Vivian stood beside her, a supportive arm around her daughter's waist. In the front row, Preston Wallace sat as a close family friend. Among the mourners, a nondescript man in sunglasses observed from a distance. Robert Caldwell, formerly Max Riker, watched his own funeral with detached fascination. The twin caskets, one large, one small, were merely for show. The Coast Guard had recovered no bodies, but ceremony demanded closure. Max noted with grim satisfaction how Audrey occasionally glanced at them, as if to reassure herself that her plan had succeeded. Following the funeral, the mourners gathered at the Riker mansion. Robert slipped inside, another anonymous face in the crowd of Boston's wealthy and connected. He overheard snippets of conversation. Such a tragedy. She's so strong considering. The company will need strong leadership now. Robert approached Preston Wallace, introducing himself as a potential investor. Preston, always alert to financial opportunities, engaged eagerly. My portfolio is diverse, Robert explained, but I'm looking for something with more creative financial structures. Preston's eyes lit with recognition of a kindred spirit. Perhaps we should discuss this further in private. My foundation is always seeking like-minded partners. I'd like that, Robert replied, handing Preston a business card. Call me when the mourning period feels less restrictive. That evening, from his hotel room, Robert watched the surveillance feeds from the Riker mansion. The guests had departed, leaving Audrey, Vivian, and Preston alone. God, I thought they'd never leave. Audrey sighed, kicking off her heels and pouring a generous glass of whiskey. You played your part beautifully, Preston told her, loosening his tie. The grieving widow, devastated but dignified. Simply perfect. Vivian raised her glass. To new beginnings, and to Max and Lucas Riker. May they rest in peace at the bottom of the Atlantic. Their laughter echoed through the empty house, cutting through Robert like a knife. He had known their betrayal was cold and calculated, but seeing their celebration of his death, and worse, his son's death, ignited something primal within him. Robert, Benjamin's voice came through the secure line. The final preparations are in place. Sophie and Lucas arrived safely at the secondary location. Good, Robert replied, his eyes never leaving the surveillance feed. It's time for Phase 2. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert Caldwell became Preston Wallace's new best friend. They met for drinks, discussed investment opportunities, and shared increasingly sensitive information about Preston's charitable foundation. Meanwhile, through Benjamin's connections, Robert made strategic moves in the financial markets, subtly undermining Sentinel Security Solutions stock value, making the company appear vulnerable just as Audrey was assuming control. The board is getting nervous, Benjamin reported after a clandestine meeting with a Sentinel executive. Your death created instability, and now these market fluctuations. They're pushing for a quick sale to stabilize the situation. And let me guess, Preston has positioned himself as the ideal buyer? Through a consortium of investors, yes. The offer comes tomorrow. Robert smiled coldly. Right on schedule. 2 days later, Robert met Preston at an exclusive club in downtown Boston. Preston was practically glowing with triumph. The deal is all but done, he boasted over aged scotch. Sentinel will be mine by the end of the month. Audrey played her part perfectly. Just enough resistance to appear proper, but ultimately persuaded that selling is the best option. Quite the team you two make, Robert observed. Known each other long? We have history, Preston replied with a smirk. Let's just say Audrey has always had excellent taste in men and in opportunities. And her mother? What does she fit in? Vivian? The mastermind in many ways. She sees the angles, identifies the targets. A brilliant woman, if somewhat terrifying. Preston laughed. I almost feel sorry for Max Riker. The poor bastard never stood a chance. Robert raised his glass in a toast. To those who never see the knife coming. That night, Robert initiated the next phase of his plan. Using access codes provided by Benjamin, he transferred incriminating financial records from Preston's foundation to a secure server. These records detailed money laundering operations, connections to organized crime, and, most damning, the conspiracy to murder Max and Lucas Riker. The evidence is comprehensive, Benjamin confirmed after reviewing the files. But will it be enough? People like Preston have escaped justice before. This isn't about justice, Robert replied. It's about vengeance. The following day, Robert arranged a private dinner with Preston at an upscale restaurant. As they discussed the finalization of the Sentinel acquisition, Robert slipped a small flash drive across the table. "What's this?" Preston asked, picking it up. "Insurance," Robert replied. "I've been doing some research on your foundation. Fascinating financial architecture." Preston's expression hardened. "I'm not sure I understand." "Let me be clear then. I know everything. The money laundering, the criminal connections, and most interestingly, your involvement in the deaths of Max and Lucas Riker." Preston's hand moved toward his jacket, but Robert shook his head slightly. "Don't. My associate at the bar has been recording our conversation. Any aggressive move would be inadvisable." "What do you want?" Preston asked, his voice barely controlled. "Initially, $100 million. Consider it an entry fee for my silence." "That's absurd. I don't have that kind of liquid capital." Robert smiled coldly. "You will, once the Sentinel acquisition is complete. You have 24 hours to decide." As Robert left the restaurant, he could feel Preston's eyes boring into his back. The trap was set, the bait taken. Now the real game could begin. Chapter 6. The Depth of Deceit. Preston Wallace was not a man accustomed to being threatened. By midnight, he had assembled his inner circle: Audrey, Vivian, and 2 trusted associates with connections to less legitimate enterprises. "Who the hell is Robert Caldwell?" Preston demanded, pacing Audrey's living room. "I've had my people digging all night. His background checks out, but it's too perfect. Something's not right. Maybe he's law enforcement?" Audrey suggested, her composure cracking for the first time since the accident. "No, cops don't ask for payoffs. This is something else." From his hotel room, Robert watched their panic through the hidden cameras. The sight of Audrey's fear gave him a satisfaction he hadn't anticipated. The next morning, Robert received a text from Preston. "Deal accepted. Meet tonight to discuss terms." The meeting location was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Boston. Preston's choice, predictably cliché. Robert arrived early, carefully examining the building's layout. As expected, Preston had men positioned throughout. 2 at the main entrance, 1 on the catwalk above, another near a side exit. Robert entered at precisely the appointed time, walking confidently into what Preston clearly intended as an ambush. "Mr. Caldwell," Preston called from the center of the warehouse floor. "I'm glad you could make it. Did you bring the initial payment?" Robert asked, approaching steadily. "About that, I've decided to propose an alternative arrangement." On cue, Preston's men emerged from their positions, weapons drawn. Robert stopped, appearing surprised, but not frightened. "Is this really necessary?" he asked calmly. "I think it is," Preston replied. "You see, I don't respond well to blackmail. It tends to encourage more of the same." "A pity. I thought we could resolve this like businessmen." Preston laughed harshly. "Oh, this is business. My business. And the first rule is eliminate threats permanently." "Interesting philosophy," Robert commented. Max Riker might have agreed with you. Something in Robert's tone made Preston pause. "What do you know about Riker?" "Everything," Robert replied, his voice changing subtly. "I know how you plotted with his wife and mother-in-law to kill him and his son for his money. I know you celebrated their deaths. And I know something you don't." "And what's that?" Preston asked, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Robert smiled, and for the first time, Preston saw something familiar in his eyes. They didn't die. Before Preston could process this, the warehouse plunged into darkness. The sounds that followed were precise and methodical. Grunts of pain, bodies falling, and finally, silence. When emergency lights flickered on, Preston found himself alone with Robert, his men unconscious or restrained on the floor. "Who are you?" Preston whispered, genuine fear in his voice. Robert stepped closer, allowing Preston to really see his face. Despite the surgical alterations, something in the eyes, the cold, calculated rage, triggered recognition. "No," Preston breathed. "It's not possible. Disappointingly predictable." "Robert," Max said softly. "The abandoned warehouse. The armed thugs. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate every move you'd make?" "If you're going to kill me, just do it," Preston said, attempting bravado. "Kill you? No. Death is too quick, too merciful. Max circled Preston slowly. I'm going to destroy you, piece by piece. Everything you value, your reputation, your freedom, your foundation, your relationship with Audrey, all of it will be systematically dismantled. You can't prove anything. I already have. Your foundation's records have been delivered to select law enforcement agencies and media outlets. By morning, your entire operation will be exposed. Preston lunged suddenly, a hidden knife flashing in his hand. Max sidestepped effortlessly, using Preston's momentum to slam him into a concrete pillar. 15 years of naval intelligence work, Max explained conversationally as Preston struggled to breathe. Did Audrey ever mention that? Or was she too busy planning my murder to discuss my resume? I never loved you. Preston gasped, blood trickling from his mouth. She was always mine. Then you deserve each other, Max replied. The question is, will her love survive when everything else is gone? Max zip-tied Preston's hands and left him slumped against the pillar. On his way out, he placed a phone call to Benjamin. It's done. Proceed with Phase 3. At the Riker mansion, Audrey paced nervously, waiting for word from Preston. The grandfather clock in the hall struck midnight, then 1, then 2. At precisely 3:07 a.m., every light in the house suddenly blazed on. Every television, every computer screen, even the digital picture frames, all activated simultaneously, displaying the same image. Security footage of Audrey and Vivian pushing Max and Lucas over the railing of the yacht. Audrey screamed, backing away from the nearest screen. Vivian emerged from her room, equally horrified. What's happening? She demanded. Before Audrey could respond, their phones chimed with simultaneous text messages. Did you really think I wouldn't have cameras on my own boat? The game has changed. Check the news in the morning. As promised, the morning brought chaos. Preston Wallace's arrest made national headlines. Money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit murder. His foundation was exposed as a criminal enterprise, his political aspirations destroyed in an instant. More shocking to Boston society was the connected investigation into the presumed deaths of Max and Lucas Riker, now classified as attempted murder, with Audrey and Vivian named as persons of interest. By noon, the police were at the Riker mansion with search warrants. By evening, mother and daughter were being questioned in separate rooms at Boston Police Headquarters, their carefully constructed alibis crumbling under the weight of evidence. From a secure location, Max watched the news coverage with Benjamin and Sophie. Daddy, Lucas called from the playground, visible through the window. Come see my castle. Be right there, buddy, Max called back, his expression softening momentarily before hardening again as he turned to Benjamin. Are we ready for the final phase? Benjamin nodded grimly. Everything is in place. But Max, Robert, are you sure about this? It's extreme, even considering what they did. They tried to kill my son, Max replied, his voice devoid of emotion. There's no punishment extreme enough for that. Chapter 7. Rising from the Depths. The legal system moved with unusual speed in the case against Preston Wallace, Audrey Riker, and Vivian Prescott. Overwhelming evidence, public outrage, and persistent media coverage created pressure for swift justice. Preston, hoping to mitigate his sentence, had turned on Audrey and Vivian, providing detailed testimony about their conspiracy. His cooperation earned him little mercy, 25 years without possibility of parole. For Audrey and Vivian, the situation was even more dire. Their trial, scheduled to begin in 3 weeks, carried potential life sentences. Released on exorbitant bail while awaiting trial, they found themselves pariahs in the society that had once embraced them. Meanwhile, a legal conundrum captivated legal experts nationwide. If Max and Lucas Riker were alive, where were they? Without their testimony or bodies, the case against Audrey and Vivian rested on circumstantial evidence and Preston's self-serving testimony. Max, still known to the world as Robert Caldwell, monitored these developments from his new headquarters, a penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Lucas, adapting with the resilience of childhood, had embraced their new life, though he often asked when they could stop pretending and go home. Soon, buddy, Max promised, though home would never again be the mansion in Boston. 3 days before the trial was set to begin, Max implemented the next phase of his plan. A package was delivered to Teresa Blackwood, the lead prosecutor on the case, containing irrefutable evidence of Max and Lucas's survival, their current identities, and a sworn affidavit detailing the attempted murder. Simultaneously, similar packages arrived at the offices of major news networks. The revelation exploded across headlines nationwide. Riker resurrection. Presumed dead businessman and son alive, living under new identities. At the prosecutor's office, Teresa Blackwood studied the evidence with mounting excitement. This was the smoking gun that would ensure convictions. She immediately filed motions to compel testimony from Max/Robert. In his penthouse, Max fielded calls from Benjamin, who monitored the legal proceedings. "They're demanding you testify," Benjamin reported. "Blackwood is pushing hard." "As expected," Max replied. "Set up the meeting, but under my conditions." 2 days later, Max sat across from Teresa Blackwood in a secure room at the federal building. His appearance had been further altered. Different hair, glasses, subtle makeup to change his facial structure just enough to maintain his Robert Caldwell identity while allowing hints of Max Riker to show through. "Mr. Riker, or do you prefer Caldwell now?" Blackwood began. "Caldwell, please. Max Riker is legally dead, and I prefer to keep it that way." "That complicates matters. This case will proceed without my physical testimony," Max interrupted firmly. "I provided sworn statements, evidence, everything you need for convictions. My son and I will not appear in court." "May I ask why?" "Your testimony would be compelling. My son has been traumatized enough. I won't subject him to a trial where he'd have to face the woman who tried to kill him. As for me, I have my reasons." Blackwood studied him carefully. "You're planning something, aren't you? Something beyond the legal system." Max's expression remained neutral. "Justice takes many forms, Ms. Blackwood. I'm sure you understand that. Whatever you're planning will occur after your case is concluded, one way or another. I've given you everything you need for justice within the system. What happens beyond that is not your concern." As Max left the meeting, his phone buzzed with a text from an anonymous number. "Please don't do this. We need to talk." Ugh. Max smiled coldly. Audrey was getting desperate. That evening, against Benjamin's advice, Max agreed to meet Audrey at a public park. He arrived early, securing vantage points and escape routes, habits from his former life that now served his new purpose. Audrey appeared at precisely the appointed time, looking haggard and afraid, a shadow of the confident woman who had planned his murder. "I almost didn't recognize you," she said as she sat beside him on the bench. "The changes are significant. That was the point. How did you survive? The water was freezing. You were miles offshore." "I was always better prepared than you gave me credit for," Max replied. "Always more capable." Audrey's eyes filled with tears. "Max, Robert, whatever you're calling yourself now, I know what I did was unforgivable. But please, if any part of you ever loved me, don't." Max cut her off, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't pretend this is about emotion. You need something from me, so get to it." The prosecutor offered a deal. 15 years if I testify against my mother. She claims the plan was all Vivian's idea, that I was coerced. "And was it?" Audrey looked away. "Does it matter? No one forced me to push you and Lucas over that railing. I did that. But Max, 15 years. I'll be an old woman when I get out." "If you get out," Max corrected her. "The deal hasn't been finalized, has it? That's why you're here. I need you to tell them you won't testify against me specifically, that you didn't see who pushed you, that it could have been only my mother." Max laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "You tried to kill our son, and now you want me to help you avoid responsibility? He's alive. You both survived. Please, Max. You know what Lucas asked me yesterday? He wanted to know why his mommy wanted him to die. How do I answer that, Audrey?" Tears streamed down Audrey's face. "I wasn't thinking clearly. Preston and Mother, they convinced me." "Stop lying," Max said softly. "I have recordings of every conversation, every plan you made, every celebration after you thought we were dead. I know exactly who you are. Then why meet me at all? Why not just let the trial proceed?" Max stood, looking down at her with cold detachment. Because I wanted you to know that what happens next isn't just the justice system at work. It's me, Audrey. Everything that's coming. The complete destruction of your life, your future, your very identity. It's all by my design. What are you going to do? She whispered. Watch the news tomorrow. Then the next day. Then the next. You spent a year planning my death. I've spent months planning something far worse for you. Your living death. As Max walked away, Audrey called after him, her voice breaking. You can't do this. Whatever you're planning, it won't bring you peace. Max paused, turning slightly. Peace was never the objective. Justice was. And justice, Audrey, is ruthless. Chapter 8. Torrents of Truth. The morning of the trial, Boston woke to shocking news. Detailed financial records showing Audrey had been siphoning money from children's charities connected to Sentinel Security for years before meeting Preston. The evidence suggested a pattern of behavior predating her marriage to Max. By midday, additional revelations emerged about Vivian's psychiatric practice. Allegations from former patients claiming she had manipulated vulnerable individuals for financial gain, sometimes in collaboration with her daughter. Inside the courtroom, Audrey and Vivian watched their carefully constructed lives disintegrate. Their attorneys scrambled to address the new allegations, only to be blindsided by more damning evidence with each passing hour. From his secure location, Max orchestrated the systematic destruction of their reputations. Benjamin had assembled a team of investigators who had spent months uncovering every secret, every misdeed, every skeleton in their closets. The prosecution is incorporating the new evidence, Benjamin reported. Blackwood is going for maximum sentences for both of them. Good, Max replied, watching Lucas build a Lego structure on the living room floor. What about the offshore accounts? Frozen as of an hour ago. The seizure orders went through without a hitch. The trial proceeded with unprecedented speed and media attention. Preston Wallace's testimony, combined with the yacht surveillance footage and the mountain of newly discovered evidence, left little room for doubt. On the third day, Audrey's attorney approached the prosecution with a desperate plea deal offer. Blackwood, following Max's guidance delivered through carefully placed intermediaries, rejected it outright. No deals, she told the defense attorney. Your client tried to murder a child. She'll serve every day of whatever sentence the judge imposes. By the trial's end, both Audrey and Vivian had been convicted on all counts. The judge, noting the unconscionable betrayal and cold-blooded calculation involved, sentenced Audrey to 30 years and Vivian to 25. As they were led from the courtroom, Audrey caught sight of a man observing from the back row, Robert Caldwell, watching him passively as she was taken away in handcuffs. That evening, Max received a visit from Teresa Blackwood at his penthouse. Justice was served today, she noted, accepting the offered glass of wine. Though I suspect your version of justice is just beginning. The legal system did its part, Max acknowledged. But some crimes deserve more comprehensive consequences. I'm not sure I want to know what you mean by that. Plausible deniability is a valuable commodity in your position, Ms. Blackwood. She studied him carefully. The financial revelations, the patient testimonies against Vivian. That was all you're doing, wasn't it? You've been systematically dismantling their lives beyond what the law could accomplish. Max neither confirmed nor denied her assertion. I believe in thoroughness. And what about your son, Lucas? How is he coping with all this? Children are remarkably resilient, especially when protected from unnecessary trauma. He knows his mother did something terrible and won't be part of our lives anymore. The details can wait until he's older. And you? Will Max Riker ever return from the dead? Max shook his head. Max Riker served his purpose. Robert Caldwell has a promising future ahead, one without the complications of a resurrection. After Blackwood departed, Max reviewed the latest reports from his investigators. Audrey and Vivian had been transferred to separate federal facilities. Preston Wallace was already serving his sentence at a maximum security prison in Colorado. The financial transfers are complete, Benjamin confirmed over their secure line. Everything has been redirected according to your instructions. And the other matter? In progress. The first disclosure happens tomorrow. Max nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over him. Perfect. The next morning, inmates at the federal correctional facility where Audrey was being held received an unusual notification. Substantial deposits had been made to the commissary accounts of every prisoner except Audrey Riker. A note accompanied the facility-wide announcement, courtesy of Audrey Riker's victims. She believes herself better than you. Show her she's wrong. Similar arrangements had been made at Vivian's facility. Within hours, mother and daughter, separated by hundreds of miles, found themselves targets of coordinated hostility from their fellow inmates. Meanwhile, a series of anonymous donations appeared in Lucas's name to children's organizations nationwide. Millions of dollars dedicated to protecting vulnerable youth, particularly those affected by parental betrayal. Is this part of the plan? Benjamin asked when Max showed him the donation confirmations. Something constructive should come from this tragedy, Max replied. Lucas will never know the complete truth about his mother, but someday he'll understand that his survival helped others. That night, as Lucas slept peacefully in his new bedroom, Max stood at the penthouse window overlooking the city lights. The vengeance he had orchestrated was comprehensive, meticulous, and utterly without mercy, just like the betrayal that had precipitated it. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've won. They're destroyed. When does it end? Ugh. Max deleted the message without responding. For Audrey, Vivian, and Preston, there would be no end to the consequences. Only a lifetime of suffering proportionate to what they had planned for him and his son. Justice, in Max Riker's world, was indeed ruthless. Chapter 9, New Tides. 1 year later, Robert Caldwell had become a respected figure in financial circles, known for his shrewd investments and generous philanthropic activities. His security consulting firm, Phoenix Protection, specialized in helping high-net-worth individuals safeguard themselves against elaborate threats, particularly those from trusted insiders. Lucas, now 6, had adapted fully to their new life. He attended an exclusive private school under the name Lucas Caldwell, where he was known as a bright, somewhat reserved boy with a particular talent for swimming. He's thriving, Sophie reported during her monthly assessment. She had transitioned from nanny to household manager, overseeing Lucas's education and well-being while Max/Robert built their new life. The nightmares have stopped completely. He hasn't mentioned his mother in over 2 months. And the therapist's evaluation? Dr. Winters believes he's processing the trauma appropriately. She recommends continuing the current approach, honest answers to his questions without volunteering disturbing details. Max nodded, satisfied. And the security protocols? Maintained rigorously. The school staff remain vigilant, though there's been no suspicious activity. Sophie hesitated before adding, he asked about the ocean yesterday, whether we could visit the beach this summer. A shadow crossed Max's face. The ocean held complicated associations now, but he wouldn't allow his son's life to be limited by fear. Make the arrangements, he decided. Somewhere private. Martha's Vineyard, perhaps. Later that day, Max received his regular update from Benjamin about their ongoing monitoring of Audrey, Vivian, and Preston. Wallace was hospitalized again, Benjamin reported. 3rd attack since his incarceration. He'll recover, but his request for protective custody was denied again. And the women? Vivian has been moved to the psychiatric ward. The isolation and harassment triggered a legitimate breakdown. As for Audrey, Benjamin paused. She attempted suicide last week. Unsuccessful, obviously. Max absorbed this information without visible reaction. Maintain the protocols. No direct intervention, but continued monitoring. For how long? Indefinitely. That evening, as Max helped Lucas with a science project, a model of ocean currents, his secure phone rang with a call from Teresa Blackwood. I thought you should know, she said without preamble. There's been a development in the Riker case. Max tensed. What kind of development? Audrey Riker is offering new information. Claims there were others involved in the conspiracy beyond the 3 convicted parties. Is there any evidence supporting this? None that we've found, Blackwood replied. It appears to be a desperate attempt to leverage a sentence reduction. But I wanted to warn you. She's specifically claiming that Robert Caldwell was part of the original conspiracy who then double-crossed the others. Max considered this new complication. How seriously is this being taken? Not very. Her credibility is non-existent, and there's no evidence connecting Robert Caldwell to any conspiracy. Still, there may be some preliminary investigation. I appreciate the warning, Max said. Keep me informed of any developments. After ending the call, Max joined Lucas in the living room, where the boy was watching a documentary about marine life. Daddy, Lucas said without looking away from the screen, do you think fish remember things like people do? That's an interesting question. Some fish have surprising memory capabilities, though different from humans. Why do you ask? Lucas shrugged. I was just thinking about memories. Sometimes I remember things that don't make sense. Max felt a chill. Like what, buddy? Like sometimes I remember Mom saying mean things. But then I think maybe it was just a bad dream. Lucas turned to face his father. Was Mom a bad person? Is that why she's gone? Max sat beside his son, choosing his words carefully. Your mother made some very bad choices that hurt people. She's paying the consequences for those choices now. Will I ever see her again? No, Lucas. That part of our life is over. The boy nodded, seeming relieved rather than saddened. I like our life now better anyway. You're happier now, Daddy. The observation struck Max deeply. Was he happier now? The rage that had fueled his elaborate revenge had subsided, replaced by a vigilant determination to protect his son and their new life. Perhaps that was a form of happiness, or at least peace. The next morning, Max met with his legal team to address Audrey's new allegations. Though the claims were unlikely to gain traction, he wouldn't leave anything to chance. We need contingencies, he told Benjamin afterward. If there's even a remote possibility of connecting Robert Caldwell to Max Riker, we need to be prepared. We've maintained the separation meticulously, Benjamin assured him. The surgical alterations, the documentation, all of it is bulletproof. Nevertheless, prepare the secondary protocol. If necessary, Robert Caldwell can disappear as thoroughly as Max Riker did. That evening, Max reviewed the financial reports from the remains of Sentinel Security Solutions. After the scandal, the company had been restructured under new leadership, with a significant portion of the profits directed to a trust for Lucas, accessible when he turned 25. Everything had been meticulously arranged to secure his son's future, regardless of what happened to Max/Robert. Multiple identities, offshore accounts, trusted guardians with clear instructions. Lucas would never be vulnerable again. A notification appeared on Max's secure tablet. Audrey's latest appeal had been denied. Her allegations against Robert Caldwell had been dismissed as fabrications from a desperate convict. Max closed the notification, feeling not triumph, but a quiet finality. The chapter was closing. The vengeance was complete. 3 days later, Max took Lucas to a private beach on Martha's Vineyard. The boy approached the ocean cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as his father stayed close beside him. The water's not scary, Lucas declared, splashing in the gentle waves. No, it's not, Max agreed. Not when you respect it and understand it. As they built an elaborate sand fortress at the water's edge, Max reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The betrayal, the fall, the calculated revenge. All of it had transformed him in ways he was still discovering. The fortress complete, Lucas looked up at his father with pride. Will it last, Daddy? Max gazed at the sand structure, knowing the tide would eventually reclaim it. Nothing lasts forever, buddy, but we've made it strong. It will stand against a lot before it falls. Later, watching the sunset from their beach house deck, Max received a final text from Benjamin. Confirmed. AR transferred to maximum security after latest incident. VP undergoing psychiatric evaluation, prognosis poor. PW denied medical parole. All monitoring systems functioning. Assets secure. Max deleted the message and turned off his phone. Lucas was pointing excitedly at dolphins playing in the distance. Look, Daddy, remember you told me dolphins know things about the sea that humans never will. I remember, Max replied, smiling at his son's flawless recall. What's the most important thing they know? Lucas asked. Max considered the question before answering. I think they know that survival isn't just about being strong or smart. It's about adaptation, becoming what you need to be when the waters change. Lucas nodded solemnly, as if the answer made perfect sense to his 6-year-old mind. Like us, right? We adapted. Exactly like us. Max agreed, pulling his son close as the dolphins continued their graceful dance against